Hi, everybody. Just before we start this week's show, we have a thrilling announcement to make.
Moo! Get thrilled. No, don't get thrilled yet. We haven't told you. Calm down and pay attention because we are going to Scotland and to Wales.
Not just for a visit, we're going on tour. We're taking a show there.
Oh, God, are we not? I thought we were just going on holiday. Well, this is awkward. Okay.
Afraid not, Anna. No, we are going to Inverness, Edinburgh, Aberdeen and Glasgow at the end of August and beginning of September. And then we're going to be in Cardiff on the 13th of September, bringing our live show, Nerd Immunity. We're going to record a live podcast in every single one. It's going to be different every time. Come to all 5. You don't get any money off, but you'll see 5 different shows. It's so much fun.
Imagine how many facts you'd have stuffed into your head after all 5 shows. Your head would explode. Do that. Get your head to explode by going to nosuchthingasafish.com/live and you will see all the dates and be able to book tickets there.
We'll see you there.
On with the show.
On with the podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of No Such Thing as a Fish, a weekly podcast coming to you from the QI offices in Covent Garden. My name is Dan Schreiber. I am sitting here with Andrew Hunter-Murray, Anna Toshinsky, and James Harkin, and once again we have gathered round the microphones with our 4 favorite facts from the last 7 days, and in no particular order, here we go. Starting with fact number 1, and that is Andy.
My fact this week is that there was a job in the 19th century which just involved looking at the sea and being able to tell when there were pilchards under the surface.
Amazing. So were they weren't sticking their head under the sea?
No, don't be crazy, James.
Okay.
A little bit of inside baseball. Dan told us before we started recording that's what he thought the job was.
Yeah, and I told you before the recording specifically so it wouldn't get mentioned on the recording. And look at us now. This is an amazing job, and it's not like they're sitting like a lifeguard on a boat looking down. They're up on a hill.
They are.
They're not even in the sea.
So I should say where this comes from. It comes from this brilliant blog called About 1816, which is by an author called James Hobson, who's written loads of books about Georgian Britain. There's one about stagecoaches, which I was reading recently, and he also writes about Cornish pilchard culture in the 18th century.
An obvious crossover.
And well, there were these. It was this huge part of Cornwall's economy in the 18th century was pilchard fishing because they were these fish that came to the coast by the millions and millions of them. This job was called being a hewer, literally like hue and cry, shouting. And they would stand on the high points along the coast, and when they saw this moving patch of purpley, oily colour on the surface, they knew that was the sign that there was the huge I was about to say flock, a shoal of pilchards underneath it, and maybe there were some seabirds hanging around it as well. And then they would blow a special trumpet, or they would wave their little flags, and they would shout, "Go and get the pilchards," to the fishermen, and then the fishermen would go and...
No, they wouldn't. They would shout, "Heather!"
Oh, yeah, true.
Yeah, and
Heather!
what does that mean, heather?
It's an old word meaning fish in Cornish.
Ah, fish!
But now you get heather cake if you go to a Cornish bakery.
Do you?
But it's not fish cake.
Oh,
it's
that's
just
confusing.
related to
nice cake.
The cake that was baked for these fishermen when they would leave for their day out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And the trumpet thing, by the way, hewing is an old word for trumpeting, according to the OED.
Oh,
Apparently,
nice.
And this is not like your regular trumpet. This was a 4-foot trumpet.
Was it?
Yeah,
It's huge.
It's ginormous.
Yeah. And
Cool.
they had these flags as well. So they would wave semaphore flags, which had special meanings to communicate to the boats, like go over there or come this way a bit or whatever.
Because then they directed the boats, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly.
Once they'd seen them. And because Wilkie Collins, obviously, famous Victorian author, but he also wrote a bunch of essays, and one of them was about these hewers. And he described them as feverishly waving 2 cloth-covered bushes, acting the part of a maniac of the most dangerous character. Because they're just standing on a cliffside.
Cloth-covered bushes. Like before they had flags, they had to cover a bush in cloth and wave it. It's weird.
Yeah.
They could have just waved around the cloth, you would think.
Yeah. What would they, presumably, if you had spotted, you've sounded your horn,
Yep.
You've got your semaphore flag out.
Bush.
Presumably, you've sounded the horn because you've seen pilchards.
Yeah.
Okay. You've seen them over that
Otherwise,
way.
you're going to lose your job.
You're
going
going to lose your job.
if you
Exactly.
do it any old time.
It's the main purpose of the job. You've pointed your flag at the direction. What semaphore needs to happen? What are you trying to communicate with the semaphore?
You're telling the boat where they are specifically. So you're saying,
Left.
go to the right, go to the left, go out to sea, come closer.
Okay, right.
Or drop your nets there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It was probably less complex semaphore and more just pointing a flag to the right or to the left.
Oh, no, it was proper. It was proper.
was
I've
there
looked
some
up the
proper
signal. Yeah. I've looked up the signals. It wasn't just
So what
left
were
for
they?
left and.
I take it
I mean,
back.
this is the worst possible medium to communicate what the semaphore signals
You can
were.
explain.
But it's just like you said, James. There would be go east or go right off, which means go straight out.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't mean go right. And cast net.
Yeah.
But they would also they could get messages to ships, so they could signal to a man on board a ship that his wife had had a baby.
Ah.
Yeah,
In semaphore language.
I don't know what the semaphore for that was.
That's so good.
They're seriously oily. I'd never really understood when people talk about oily fish and the non-oily fish, and they bang on about oily fish being really good for you. What the difference was, but that's why they were prized. So in the 19th century, they were prized for their oil for lamps, weren't they?
Yeah. Ooh,
and
yes.
so that would just be sold, and that would fund the whole industry.
Yeah.
And you'd have these pilchard palaces
Yes.
where they put all the fish in a barrel, put 6,000 fish in a huge hogshead barrel, and then I think you squeeze down on the fish, and all the oil comes out and drains off into the gutters, and then that's barreled up separately.
Yeah.
And then you can use it for lamps and things like that.
Well, they used to just hand them out as well to anyone who was quite poor. So as the boats would come back in, there's reports that you would have locals standing in the water just waiting for it to come in and say, can you please just give me pilchards? And the person who's on the ship would feel it was honor bound to give the pilchard, so they would just hand them out. And then at the palaces as well, there would be the poor waiting outside, and they would be waiting for fish that had like broken backs or that were diseased, or the ones that were being shocked.
Imagine having to rifle through 30 million pilchards with little X-ray machines to see if they've broken their spine.
Oh, this one's got a bit of a cough. Show that to the paw.
Cross life. But they did, and kids used to go to the beaches with plastic bags and kind of scoop them out of the water. But it's not just today.
Plastic bags?
But not plastic.
In the 19th century.
now.
Cornwall is, quite behind the times in some aspects, but in others, unbelievably advanced.
It had the Tesco plastic bags
Well, they
as
had-
early as the 1400s.
They had the oil to make it from, didn't they? Because of all the bloody pilchards.
Exactly. Sorry, not plastic bags, other bags, non-plastic bags.
But yeah, so it was back in the 1800s. It was massive. And in 1871, they were exporting roughly 16,000 tons per year. Now, that declined massively in Cornwall, massively, to the point of the 90s where they were only landing about 6 tons in total. So from 16,000 to 6 tons, and that's the early 90s. But then that all changed when a man called Nutty Noah came along, and he reinvigorated the whole thing by rebranding the pilchard.
I've seen Nutty Noah. I think he's making some strong claims.
Huge claims.
What is basically just a random fisherman. Is he from the south coast?
Yes.
Or from...
What's he claiming?
He's from Cadgwith.
Oh, he's from Cadgwith?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I go to Cadgwith every year. I've probably met him down the pub. And I don't know if he's a guy who's reformed the whole industry. I mean, it's not like everyone's eating pilchards for every meal, right?
No, but I mean, a lot of people, when you read interviews, sort of claim that he called them Cornish sardines. That suddenly was like, ooh, that sounds a bit posh.
Well, someone called them that. Isn't it? They have had a rebrand.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't him, but it was in that. Well, actually, no, it was him. It
wasn't him. It was a guy called Nick Howell, I
Yeah.
believe, in
Sorry,
the
right.
90s, who, realised that pilchards had a bad reputation. They're called sardines on the continent, and so they were called. And pilchards are just adult sardine. What we call sardines, pilchards are like adult versions of that. Aren't
And they're
they?
all herring.
And they're all types of herring.
What was his connection then to Nutty Noah? Because Nutty Noah
don't know
was
who
part
Nutty
of.
Noah
Oh,
is.
Nutty Noah was a guy called Martin Ellis, and he was basically the only.
Why do you keep calling him Nutty Noah?
Well, that's what he calls himself. It's his nickname. And he kind of.
He collected 2 of every nut, didn't he? Saved them when there was a big flood.
Exactly.
2 peanuts.
Well, ironically, apparently his ship sank. So I don't think that's the story. Did you read this, Anna?
No.
He took in too much pilchard. It got too heavy, and his ship went down, and it had to be rescued, and a helicopter had to come in in to
Helicopter rescuing a whole ship.
I think him and the pilchards possibly.
Not him. Take the pilchards first.
But this one's got a broken back. I don't care.
Women and pilchards first. But the point is I can't find any record of a helicopter picking up a pilchard man called Nutty Noah. So it's the story that's told of him.
Rescues out in Cornwall,
But they log them as well. You log rescues.
You do have to log the rescues.
Yeah.
It's frowned on to just go around rescuing people
Did you
and then not
check
telling
Nutty
anyone.
Noah and his actual name, Martin, whatever?
Good point. I just did Nutty Noah. I should go back and check Martin Ellis.
They wouldn't put it on the form, would they? Like person rescued.
It was a massive list. There was 6 tons of pilchard that I had to get through before his name came.
Every individual one.
Every pilchard.
Bobby, Billy, Sarah. They are elsewhere. It's not just Cornwall that has a monopoly on them. And I actually, when I was looking at my pilchard can and realised it came from South Africa, I thought, I wonder how many there are. And there are shed loads in South Africa, and they've turned it into a big tourist industry there. And the sardine harvest, the pilchard harvest, is so massive that sometimes they don't need nets because the sea just dumps piles on the beach.
Right.
Wow.
The sea
So
retreats.
just like get a tractor or
Just-
a dump truck.
Exactly, scoop it up.
Wow.
And yeah, they've got sort of festival days where they invite tourists to come and take part in various sardine marches and stuff like that. No one knows why they go there. It's kind of a mystery because the shores of like northern South Africa where they hang out are not very appealing to sardines.
And
They're
do we
a bit
know
too
why they
warm.
come to Cornwall? Are they mating or are they feeding or we don't know?
I think it's for feeding. I think they're coming. Which way would they be coming? I think it's for feeding.
But that African sardine run that you mentioned, Anna, that might be the biggest biological movement on the planet. Because there's also the East African wildebeest herds. Obviously, your individual wildebeest, a lot bigger than your individual pilchard.
Yeah.
But there are so many pilchards that they might outweigh all the wildebeest. It's hard to tell.
Right.
It's one of those classic, would you rather fight one wildebeest or
Absolutely.
1,000 pilchards?
Yeah.
It depends where you're fighting them. If you're in the sea,
Yeah.
I'll take on the wildebeest.
Yeah. And because they've challenged you, you are the one who gets to choose the location.
Yeah.
That's
I would
good
choose
to
actually a
recall.
hot air balloon for either fight.
That's clever.
Yeah.
Playing it
That
really
is clever.
safe. Don't
Yeah.
even back yourself against the pilchards on the desert.
Like, why take the risk?
They have a tendency of disappearing and reappearing. So I think people keep blaming the decline of pilchard industry on like people's declining tastes. But they just bugger off sometimes. This is the thing with oily fish, is why you can't depend on them, because they slip through your fingers. Because the reason it's not because of that. The reason they're oily is because they have to have loads of fat in their body, because they're the fish that migrate huge distances in massive shoals. So that's why you've got these oily fish. They're fish that pelagic, that live in the middle part of the sea, as opposed to all your white fish, which live at the bottom.
Good word.
Which I thank you very much. I didn't make it up myself, but thank you. So these shoals sometimes migrate somewhere different. So in 1820, we say the industry was massive. In 1820, they all disappeared and went to Ireland. And the Cornish were really furious. And there were articles written in the 1820s saying, this is a complete disaster. The Irish don't like pilchards. They're just flocking to Ireland. And the Irish are saying,
really?
we think these are disgusting.
The Irish do have their own hewers, though, and they have their special laws for their hewers.
So I think it's got pilchard fancying has gone up and down. So
Has
they
it?
have sometimes had a big hewering tradition, and then it just went out of fashion.
Okay. There's a special law in Ireland that if you're a hewer, you're allowed to stand on any private property to do your job.
No way.
What?
Yeah.
You
I mean, you can't go
gotta
into
be
the middle of
testing that.
Dublin and just stand in someone's house.
I need to come into your bedroom now.
Presumably, it's someone's property that's on the coast.
I've got
right?
reason to believe there are 5 million pilchards in this room. Let me in. Let me into this bank vault right now.
Help me with my trumpet.
Can I just ask on the hewers, Andy, that you said it was a job, but the pilchers just turn up at one stage in the autumn, right? So what do they do for the rest? It's very seasonal, this job, isn't it?
It is seasonal work. You're absolutely right. I imagine they had a kind of portfolio career.
They might be a
these
trumpeter
guys.
for the rest of the year.
Yeah,
I guess.
absolutely, or a bush semaphore instructor. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff they could do with their skills,
you're right.
But they had, they did get paid a guinea a week during the good times.
really?
So maybe it was one of those jobs where, much like a tourist season today, actually, it's very big in the high season, and then just sort of,
Could be a signalman.
Yes.
Or woman.
Yeah, on the railways. On the railways, for
railways.
example.
On the
airports.
railways.
At the airports.
At the airports, yep.
Or
Could
the
be
Victorian
a
airport.
plastic bag maker.
Stop the podcast.
Stop the podcast!
Hi, everybody. We wanted to let you know that this week we are sponsored by Calm.
Yes, Calm is the #1 mental wellness app. It's designed to reduce stress and anxiety day to day. There are all sorts of things on there to help you do that. There are guided meditations, curated music tracks, sleep stories. Very nice if you sometimes have trouble sleeping. These are a way to help you to slowly slip into the slipstream of slumber.
That's beautiful, beautiful alliteration.
Thank you.
There.
I am auditioning, yes.
Yeah. Yes, Calm is used by 100 million people. That is like a 70th of the world's population. I mean, come on, if a 70th of the world's population are using calm.com, it's got to be doing something good. Do check it out. And if you go to calm.com, so that's calm.com/fish, you'll get 40% off unlimited access to their entire library.
You can have no qualms about using Calm's app, which is called Calm. So just go to calm.com/fish and you get 40% off a Calm premium subscription.
And as soon as you've finished doing that, you should probably sign up to Harry's.
Yes, you've calmed your mind, now smoothen your face. Harry's is the firm that sells you shaving products. It's more than just a razor company. They can revamp your entire grooming routine.
They can. I mean, looking at Andy's face right now, you could sledge down it. It's that slippery and smooth, and
Big chin, big chin.
the huge chin makes for a lovely kind of jump at the end. And I'm pretty sure it's because he's been using Harry's. It's expertly engineered weighted handle that it comes with. It has a 5-blade cartridge, and you get your free shower gel just for our listeners.
You can't smell it through your headphones right now, but I promise the shower gel smells absolutely delicious. And you'll get it with your trial Harry's set for just £3.95 for delivery. All you have to do is go to harrys.com/fish. That's Harry's, Harrys, as in belonging to Harry, and not Harry's with an IES, like, sort of bothers.
Not the thing that you'll find Andrew Hunter Murray does to you on a daily basis. Harry's, the possessive, but without the apostrophe, harrys.com/fish. All you'll cover is the £3.95 delivery, and you'll get your Harry's free trial set.
Okay, on with the podcast.
On with the show.
Okay, it is time for fact number 2, and that is my fact. My fact this week is that the sound designer for the movie King Richard is called Richard King.
So good.
Yeah.
So good.
So great. Did you just spot this?
No,
Or was someone else?
this was a buddy of mine, Ali Plum. He's the BBC Radio 1 music reviewer and interviewer. He spotted it and he told me about it. And Richard King is, he's actually quite famous, as you can imagine. He's part of this big movie.
He's won 4 Oscars.
Wow. He's been the sound designer for movies like the latest Wonder Woman, 1984, Tenet, Dunkirk. So he's very tied in with Christopher Nolan. He did Interstellar with him.
Do we know if Richard King only took the job because he enjoyed the symmetry of the name? Or
I've got a good reason why he might. Tenet is all about things being backwards as well as forwards.
Palindromic.
And King Richard King. It explains why he took the job, as well as him being a massively respected sound engineer and him needing the work. But for Tenet, this is one specific thing. So I haven't seen Tenet. It sounds...
I've seen it.
So some things happen backwards, even though the world is happening forwards,
Yeah,
right?
you kind of got 2 parallel things that are happening. One goes forward and one goes backwards.
This is why I haven't watched it. But they had to make reverse gunshots.
Yes.
So, but they tried playing all the sound effects they had. They have a sound effect of a gun, which is... bang, and then
why didn't they just use you for the sounds?
but it sounded rubbish. It sounded cheap and stupid when they just played the sounds backwards. So they had to generate new sounds of what a plane taking off might sound like backwards but forwards.
Yeah, interesting.
So weird.
Because they could have just taken the original one and made it go backwards, right? Because they have that technology, but it doesn't quite sound right.
They have the technology to make sound rewind. You're kidding.
It's amazing.
How have they not shared this with the rest of us?
Even 20 years ago they had that. But the thing is that King Richard is about tennis, and that movie is Tenet, so maybe he's just working his way through the dictionary.
Yes.
He's definitely got a word thing. He's the Susie Dent of the sound engineer world, it sounds like.
I don't know. I wonder if this movie does, because they had a carpenter called James Crane. Carpenters might use cranes, mightn't they?
Well, if there was a carpeting emergency 300 metres up, they might do, yeah.
Okay, look.
This Hewer was stuck somewhere in Ireland.
This is the one I'm opening with. They had a health and safety manager called Guinevere Aid, like first aid.
Yeah, that's
I
good.
think that's
Okay.
good.
Yeah, and the tennis racket stringer was called Jeffrey I bat you one.
That's
I
not true.
bet you won.
I bat you one. Yeah.
How are you spelling it? How much have you walked the pronunciation?
IBATUAN. I bat you one.
Wow.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
that's good.
That's extremely good. I would
I get it now.
definitely have opened with I bet you on rather than James Crane, the carpenter. If he'd been called James Plane,
Yeah.
I'd have been absolutely on board.
I'll be honest. Like, I was working off just basically all the people who worked on this show on IMDb, and it was slim pickings.
With Slim Pickings on it. I love him. So sound design has a nickname which is used within the industry, which is called foley. So you're a foley artist. Foley sounds within movies. It's really amazing. And particularly if you read interviews with Richard King, he can make something that is quite a boring sound suddenly seem like, wow, what a day that must have been of picking the sound for this tiny thing that I would never think about. If you're in a room and a door needs to be opened, right, you would think, okay, there's probably just this bank of sound where it's just door opens. And he talks about it saying, no, the variety is endless. You have doors that are opened because maybe they're open because there's a baby sleeping in the room, so it's a soft opening. So he's like, you don't only have just the creaks of a door speed opening, you have emotional content to the opening of the door. And he's like, so I have like, you know, he's got thousands of doors that he's collected.
Sad door,
Yeah.
happy door, furious
Drunk
door.
door. Terminator 2 I was reading about. The opening scene of Terminator 2, there's a sort of exoskeleton Terminator walking in a apocalypse over all these skulls and stuff.
Yeah.
So the ambient sound that you hear in that scene, if you watch that scene next time, is you've got someone having put a microphone just next to the crack in a door at George Lucas's Skywalker Ranch and just getting the ambience of the outside.
Yeah.
And that's mixed with someone going whoosh with their mouth, whoosh. So that's what you're hearing in the background. And then when this exoskeleton is standing on all of these human skulls, that's pistachio nuts being crushed. Wow. So those are the elements that you see in that scene. And just how they get to thinking a pistachio nut can be a better sound than a real skull being crushed.
Also, it is sometimes easier to access pistachio nut shells than actual skulls, isn't it? In certain places.
If you get a pistachio nut, you know how they're like slightly open on one end?
Yeah.
If you just squeeze the slightly open end, then the lever mechanism will open the other end and you can just pull the top shell off and then just get to the inside without kind of
Are you sure that actually works?
Yeah, I do.
Does it?
Yeah.
You would have been fired by Richard King immediately when you handed in your sound effects. What the fuck is this, James?
What I'm just thinking is when you watch actual tennis, right? Someone does a serve and you hear the noise of the serve, and it's quite, you would know that noise if you heard it, right? But I remember reading that sometimes in sports on TV they add the sounds in later, right? I don't know if this is true, but I remember reading that like when a dart hits a dartboard, if you imagine yourself playing darts, they don't make that when it hits it, right?
Yeah.
But then some people do that. And I remember reading that in horse racing, there's no microphones on the far side, so there's no way you could make that sound. So I thought that they use wildebeest.
They do. They absolutely.
They play that in.
It's the sound of a. It's the sound of a stampeding wildebeest, and they play. They don't play it for the audience in the
No, obviously
live,
on
but they play it
TV.
over TV. Yeah.
What?
So this is insane. I was reading about a guy called Dennis Baxter, who was the sound designer for the Olympics in 2012, and in fact multiple Olympic games. And this is exactly the problem, James, because like loads of places they don't have microphones for the whole thing, but they have to add microphones wherever they can, and then sometimes cheat a bit. So for the balance beams, they would put microphones on the beam. So no audience would ever hear the creaking and the movement of the beam, but you do on TV. And then for the archery, they had a microphone on the target, they had a microphone next to the archer for the launch, and they also put one in between on the arrow's path to capture the swoosh.
Oh, nice.
But they're catching the actual sound there. They're not, because for me, I would probably get like a ruler on the side of a table and then twang it.
That's genius.
Yeah. But you're right, they fake it sometimes. So Dennis Baxter, he did the boat race for a while.
Oh, was this in an interview with him?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard this. It's
And
amazing.
The boat race, if you're actually in the boats or on the bank, what it sounds like is the engines of the support boats and the helicopters flying overhead.
Yeah,
and if you play that on TV, it would be an incredibly weird experience.
Yeah.
So he went out before the boat race, he recorded clean swooshing rowing sounds, And that's what you're hearing.
And that's
You're
what you
hearing Dennis
hear.
Baxter rowing,
Well,
or someone him
cheated
recording
live. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
How cool is that?
And it is
clever.
with tennis as well. It's a really precise job working out when to up the volume of the ball hitting sound and when to decrease it. And it depends completely on the tension and also the crowd sound. And I think he does Grand Slams as well. And yeah, he talks about you have to sense how tense a moment it is and then reduce the crowd sound, or sense that, you know, everyone's getting really excited and then you bring up the crowd sound and then you make the sound of the tennis ball hitting the ground a bit less, the crowd a bit higher.
Is there someone doing the moaning as well? As
That's his wife, actually.
I was reading about Foley, and there was actually a film made about Foley art itself, and it's called Barbarian Sound Studio. It was a horror film. It was made in about 2012. It had some famous actors in it. It was meant to be okay. Anyway, it was partly about Foley art. So the main character is working in a movie studio, and he's coming up with sound effects. And in this film, he has to come up with the sound effects for these really gory horror scenes. And he has to come up with these sound effects by smashing up pieces of fruit, the classic. So he's shown in this film smashing up watermelons or mangoes or whatever it takes.
Yeah.
But they realised when making this film that the sound of fruit smashing up, it does not actually sound enough like the sound of fruit smashing up.
So they had to find some skulls and break them in, didn't they?
They couldn't get the skulls, but the sound of the fruit smashing up is made with pieces of wet cloth and bits of wood being bashed around.
That's amazing.
That's so funny.
How meta is that?
We keep saying Foley. Jack Foley was a real person as well.
Yeah.
This was the person who created the idea that you could overdub within the sort of behind the scenes of the movie, the post production. And his first job when he did it was he was working on a movie which was Showboat, and I think one of his first things that he did for it was he walked as three people. So he had a cane and he had his own footsteps, and he managed to match the footsteps of three people walking using both just his feet and a cane. And that was the moment when they went, oh my god, what is this? And he started experimenting more
Was
with
it
it.
3 one-legged people?
No, I guess you can move your feet quite fast to
Got
be in
it.
time with all of the feet, can't you?
So did he get people to close their eyes and say, 3 people are going to come in and out of this room, and then, you know, did 3 gates and then said it was all me?
Oh, I see. No,
Like
I think
you-
he just showed them the product of the recording matched with the film.
He could have been an incredible master criminal, you know.
Make it look like a burglary was 5 people, but actually it was 1.
Make it sound like a burglary was 5 people.
Yeah.
Right,
You know?
that's
He
true.
would be no good with an eyewitness.
No, that he could only operate under conditions of pitch black darkness. But they would, you know, afterwards, the security guard who'd been
He
blindfolded.
could rob Specsavers.
Exactly. Again, everyone would have to be blindfolded and in the area as well. But then they would say afterwards, oh yeah, 15 large
Wildebeest
came in to the shop and took all the glasses.
Or
whatever.
herring, we're not sure which.
But he could do them so accurately. And then, because they'd never look for Jack Foley.
He died when he was 76 years old, and he reckoned he had a long career in movies.
Or did he? Did he just make it sound like he died to continue his crime spree?
Good call, yeah. That's a cold case, we don't know. But he reckons he did 5,000 miles of walking in the time of his career for films. He doesn't say whether or not that was like, I was walking to buy some pistachios, or I assume it's the footsteps that have appeared on our screens.
Yeah, I would assume so.
I don't know. But also, his voice was on movies. He is responsible for the first ever, we believe, Tarzan call.
Oh,
The very first, Tarzan the Tiger in 1929 was the first movie, and it wasn't that though.
Was it not?
No, it was just him going ee-ah, and that was supposedly Jack Foley. It's sort of a bit lost whether or not it was him, because I think the footage has itself been lost. It's one of those lost
That
films.
call, the one that we know that goes it's like a palindrome, isn't it? That's
Yes.
a fun fact about that.
And it's trademarked. It's owned by the Edgar Rice Burroughs family,
Yeah.
and they've got the exact. It's like 9 calls or 10 calls, isn't it? And it's an exhale and a.
Well, after Tenet and Tennis, Richard King can do Tarzan next. Yeah.
The film just about the Tarzan call. What would the title of that film be?
If it was just about the call.
Yeah. I'm just wondering how you'd spell the film name. Just loads of A's, I suppose.
R-E-R-E-R-E-R-E-R, I think.
You'd think it was a hospital drama.
Right.
Shall we talk about the Williams sisters?
Yeah.
So this movie, King Richard, the King Richard in the title is the father of Venus and Serena Williams, and I don't think it gives anything away for the movie to say he was a very hot-housing father who really wanted his children to be tennis players at a very, very young age. He'd never had any training, but he taught them how to become great tennis players, and they were the greatest of all time. I read an interview with Venus from 1991. This was in Sports Illustrated, and even then she knew she wanted to be a tennis player. She was a brilliant tennis player. They said, what would you like to be when you grow up? She's like, I want to be a tennis player or an archaeologist or an astronaut who travels to Jupiter.
Cool.
Wow.
So that was her 3 possible things she wanted to be. And I looked it up because I wondered, and this is true. Both Venus and Serena now own properties in the town of Jupiter, Florida.
No.
So they kind of went, because a lot of sports people live in Jupiter. So, and they, yeah.
Very
That's
nice.
great.
Cool, isn't it?
Is that the
great
Jupiter she
connection.
meant when she was 5 or whatever, do you think? Just happens to be an astronaut, but lives in this tennis village.
That's amazing.
Venus Williams,
Yeah.
one of the 2 Williams sisters,
That's right.
Yeah.
owns a quarter of a dolphin.
Okay.
A Miami Dolphin?
A Miami Dolphin,
Yeah,
the American
yeah,
football
yeah.
team. She has a stake.
Oh,
in
is
them.
it
She has a
that?
stake in the Miami Dolphins, and it's quite a small stake.
With Serena.
Yeah, but I think so. It's less than 1% that they own or that she owns. But anyway, if you include all the spare players they would have, it would work out at 1/4 of one dolphin.
Amazing.
Wow.
That's really good.
Wait, and it's both of them that own it then, is it?
It's quite hard to find the exact chapter and verse on how much they own or whether they own it together.
You can understand why that hasn't been too extensively reported on, I guess, with all the stuff out there about the Williams sisters. But so, in 1995, Serena was 14, and she wanted to go pro, and she was too young by the rules, and so she filed a lawsuit. An antitrust lawsuit against the WTA, I think.
Really?
Saying I should be able to play. And actually, their dad had a bit of a volte-face in their early teens because he suddenly realised that tennis can really screw you up. And the junior tennis circuit, all the parents were just awful. There was a little bit of racism around. And he actually said to, I think, Venus, I don't think you should become a tennis player. But she must have thought, well, thanks a lot, Dad. You trained me for nothing else for 12 years. But yeah, Serena tries to do this lawsuit to
That's
say that you have to let me in,
interesting.
even though I'm 14.
So that was Serena, was it?
Sorry, Serena did this
the
lawsuit
lawsuit
saying that
How
you have to let me in,
interesting.
even though I'm 14.
So at that stage, Venus will have already become pro, right? So
Yeah.
maybe that was the reason. Because in the movie, a lot of it is about how he doesn't want them to become pros. He doesn't.
Really?
He don't want them to play any matches until they become professional. Really,
Oh,
they play
yeah.
when they're like 10 years old, and then they don't play again until they're professional.
Except that they play with him, don't
Well, they were allowed
just
to
don't
They
play.
practice, yeah.
Yeah.
They practice.
They never touched a racket again.
But how do you go pro without going up a system to get to the being
Well, they
pro?
were so good.
Right.
They basically had a pro. They had a trainer, and they were really, really good. And there was one game, one of her first ever games, Venus. She lost against Arantxa Sanchez Vicario, and this is part of the movie. And they kind of slightly changed what happened in the movie. But anyway, she lost this game, and then they interviewed her afterwards and said, "Well, how is this?" Loss against one of the best players in the world, how's it compared to the other times when you've lost in other games? And she went, well, I've never lost before. And she'd never lost a match in any of her junior things, and then she stopped playing, and then she became pro, and so
Wow.
she'd never ever lost a match before at that stage.
Amazing. Yeah, so Richard, the dad, he basically decided that he was going to turn his 2 girls, and he had a family before. This was his second marriage and a new 2 new kids to the family. He was watching TV and he saw that a tennis player could earn $40,000 a week, and he thought, my God, that sounds amazing. I'm going to train my girls up to do that. And he wrote up this 78-page training manual for Serena and Venus that he had, everything that he'd learnt in there and how he needed them to be. He did a really interesting thing, and I say interesting, it's terrible. He had his kids play, Venus and Serena, out in the public, and he would pay local kids to come and jeer at them, to yell at them as they were playing, so that they could get used to the idea of crowds being against them and having to push through it. And so
Oh my God.
there are people out there right now who have an anecdote, which is I was paid as a child to
That
jeer
explains-
at Serena.
I think my family might have been doing that at fish gigs.
What kind of
Whatever.
prodigy were they attempting to turn you into, and where did it go wrong?
Okay, it is time for fact number 3, and that is James.
Okay, my fact this week is that there is a tree in Pakistan that has been under arrest for more than 120 years.
And still no charges brought.
No.
Wow.
That's Tony Blair levels of, what's it called? The thing that Tony
Habeas
Blair did,
corpus.
habeas corpus
That
suspension.
is such an obscure reference to Blair-era Home Office policy.
Guys, we all remember it, and
Oh,
we're all
sorry.
still outraged.
Yep, sorry.
Anyway, yes. Apparently no habeas corpus when it comes to trees in Pakistan. This is... Well, is this true? I mean, there is a tree. There's a tree in Pakistan that is undoubtedly true.
Yeah.
It's a banyan tree. It's undoubtedly true that the tree is chained up.
Yeah.
And it's undoubtedly true that there is a board on the tree that says, I am under arrest. One evening, a British officer, heavily drunk, thought I was moving from my original location and ordered Mess Sergeant to arrest me. And since then, I am under arrest. All that is true.
All that's true.
This officer is supposedly called James Squid. I have no evidence that there was ever anyone called James Squid.
I looked as well. I couldn't find
nothing in the
anything.
newspaper archives, nothing in old books, nothing. Like
Also, it just feels like Squid wasn't anyone's surname.
Well, it is. There are people called Squid. I looked on
yeah.
one of those genealogy websites where you can see families.
Yeah.
Squid was a surname back in the
Right.
day, but there's no notable Squids. If you go to Wikipedia,
Notable squids.
No, Squid, empty page.
empty page.
Wow. Sorted out.
The Squids.
Jimmy Wales.
Well, he's only interested in the larger marine mammals, isn't he? So
Wow,
but
James.
yeah,
Squid-
and this is a thing that certainly the people who live in Landi Katal, which is the place where this tree is, which is in the Khyber region of northern Pakistan near the border with Afghanistan, the people there, it's the story, the local story is that this happened. And I think one reason possibly that it's still there is they wanted to remind people of the colonial times and the bad things that the British colonists brought to the area, and remember the bad times.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
What's it chained to?
The ground.
The ground.
I see.
And the reason it's chained to the ground is because so that it can't run away.
Yeah.
Because the reason James Squid had it arrested is while he was riding home one night,
Yeah.
it leapt at him. It made a sudden movement, and he
Yes.
thought, "Whoa there!" And
It was quite a windy night, wasn't it?
so he claims supposedly drunkenly, and I say supposedly, it's about a possible fictional human. This possible fictional human was.
we don't even
sounds-
believe the fictional human's drunk story.
Sounds like James Squid has a lot of questions to answer himself.
Yeah.
Can't answer them.
Yeah, it's said to have.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
they can walk, can't they?
They
banyan
can.
trees.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and they
that's
do
true.
walk quite slowly.
Sorry, can we unpack this a bit?
Yeah, so they possibly don't walk fast enough to jump out at you on a dark night, but they are an extraordinary tree. They're known as strangler figs because the way they grow is they start out as a seed that's pooed out of a bird or whatever, or blown onto the branch of another tree, and then they drop their roots from that branch.
That's the crate.
It's
Have you guys heard
unbelievable.
that before? I'd never heard of that. That is extraordinary. It just takes over a tree from the outside.
Yeah.
It's very
It kills
cool.
it.
Yeah.
And it
But
yes,
the way
and then it kills the inner tree. The banyan then becomes what's called a columnar tree. So there's a hollow column in the middle of it where the previous tree was, and then all sorts of animals get to live inside that hollow bit.
It's like the magic faraway tree.
Hang
But the
on.
walking-
Yeah, what's the walking? I still don't believe they walk.
So the walking is if you've got your original root that's been dropped from the branch of a tree, and that embeds itself, and that's essentially the trunk, and then it's rooted into the ground,
Right.
and then it grows up again from the roots and it grows out. So you have these things that look like forests of lots of trees that are just one tree because it keeps on growing up from the roots and then dropping roots down again and then going up again, and then often the original trunk will get diseased and have to be removed. And then I say that that's walking because it's lifted up that leg and taken it out of that position and moved it to the next
It
position.
hasn't moved it to the next position. It's just been removed. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
it's just died and
But
been
the
amputated.
new trunk.
It's
that
grown
basically-
another leg.
Yeah, the roots that come down, one of those will become the major trunk.
Yes,
It's
that's
like
right.
if
I
the
was
way-
forgetting that definition of walking where I have my leg amputated, but then I grow a new leg, which I put somewhere slightly different.
That's
and
how
then
a lot
do
of
this
people do
a
it.
series of times over a century and end up going about 10 feet. Ah, yes, walking. Love to go for a walk.
It's not,
Look, when you're a tree, you have to take everything you get, right?
That's true. That's true.
it's not running. Certainly.
I saw a massive banyan tree this morning.
Yeah?
It's humongous. It's in India.
How big?
It's we're talking about 4.7 acres, but this is how big it is. With what Anna was mentioning about the idea that these roots grow back out through the ground, so they're called aerial roots. They look like their own trees. This one has 2,800 of them. That's how many it's grown. And the original trunk, like Anna was mentioning about the other one, also has been diseased and chopped away. So even the original leg is no longer there.
They're pretty amazing. They're so big that these trees, these really, really massive ones, I read can shelter 20,000 people. So let's say it's raining and you're with 19,999 friends and you all need to keep dry. You can just all slip underneath one of these trees.
Or you're Jack Foley, you've just pulled off a job and you need to make it sound like there are 20,000 of you hiding under a tree. Yep.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah. 20,000 people, though, that is a lot of people.
That's a lot.
Like, if you think of most lower division football stadiums, Tranmere Rovers, who I support, like, that's more than twice as many of people who go and watch Tranmere every week.
So people could leave Tranmere one week and all hide under the same tree, and the next week a completely different crowd of fans could turn up, join the initial crowd under the previous tree.
And the other crowd are like, what was the score? Because we just missed the match because we're hiding under this tree.
Or, in fact, because I think the biggest one is about 3 football pitches. So you could all crowd around the outside of the tree and then 3 teams could play 3 different matches underneath it. Although there are shed loads of branches in the way, so actually that wouldn't work.
Hang on, 3 football pitches, you can get 6 teams on there, can't you?
That's such good football
I'm
knowledge.
not a football expert,
Well
but I
done.
think you can have 2 teams on the same pitch if it's a
you're-
really exciting match.
Right, yeah.
So there's a story that there's a prison in the Shabakwadar area, and it's called Shabakwadar Fort. And in the 1800s, 1840, there was a group of warriors that attacked it, and they went inside, and there was a big clash, and it went on all night long, and the Sikh people who were in there fought back, and they managed to get them out. But there was this huge thing going, how the hell did they get in here? Someone's responsible for this. They need to pay. And so they had a big court case, as it were, like a big inquisition into working out who did this.
Yeah.
And they came up with a verdict. And the verdict was it was the fault of the wooden doors that let them in. And as a result, the wooden doors have been arrested and have been hanging in the tower, chained up, much like this tree, ever since the 1840s, and they're still chained up.
Wow.
They're
That's
still
the
under
That's
arrest.
the scapegoat, isn't it? The scape
Yeah.
door.
Yes.
Not the escape door. That's awful if you try and get out through the escape door and you just walk into war repeatedly.
So, wow, this might be a thing, like a trend of chaining up trees or wood.
Yes.
As in, I've not heard of it happening anywhere else. I did look for arrested trees, and you don't find any others.
No.
And
It's
this
unusual.
slightly predates your tree as well by about 40 years or so.
And
Yeah.
also, these are wooden doors, so they were trees a lot before that.
Yeah. We don't know how old the doors were.
No.
We don't know.
Food for thought.
Do you know some banyan trees have bells hanging off them so you can ring the bell to access the spirit at the top of them?
Cool.
Do they?
What
Yeah.
is the spirit? Is it a helpful spirit?
A goddess. Well, they're very sacred, so yeah, it's a positive thing.
Oh, good.
There's lots of mythology around them because they are quite extraordinary trees. They feature quite heavily in Hindu mythology. In fact, I think there's Hindu texts from like 500 BC that say the entire universe is an upside down banyan tree, and so it's growing from the heavens down to us, and then its leaves are little aphorisms, little bits of wisdom. And there's,
It's possible.
women wrap threads around them, don't they? There's a festival in India, Vat Purnima, which I think means banyan full moon, and married women go for 3 days and hang out with banyan trees, wrapping threads around them as a way of...
Why?
Because they love their husbands so much. It's really gross.
There is, a lot of it is, it's a bit like, what do you call, like a Hindu almost, right? Because all the women go together.
But a married
like-
woman
But there's
Hindu.
only married, yeah.
I reckon that's the next place for the Hindu market to go.
The banyan trees.
No, just like married Hindus. I think that could be a huge thing.
So what are you celebrating then?
Getting away from your husband for a bit,
Yeah,
probably.
nice.
Yeah.
No,
I
how,
think
how
this
much you love him.
Oh, sorry.
of
Yeah,
course.
yeah. Well, that's how it's sold. But everyone who goes on it knows we're going for a fun.
Well, if
party.
we love our husband so much, why are we going to a strip club in Blackpool?
Sometimes
There's a tree in the middle of it.
you need
honestly.
Stop tying ribbons to that.
to that guy's trunk. Oh my god, he's got an aerial route. Stop the podcast!
Stop the podcast!
Hi everybody, just wanted to let you know we are sponsored this week by Stitch Fix.
Yep, Stitch Fix is the reason that for the first time, maybe in my life, people just keep coming up and complimenting me on my clothing.
Yes, and that is because Stitch Fix is a clothing company. That's the reason.
Yes, that's not like a mind control company where I look at people and persuade them that I look fantastic. Yeah, they do clothes.
Still waiting for seed capital for your mind control company, Anna. Sorry to hear that. The point is that shopping for clothes can be a complete pain in the bum, whether you're in cyberspace or meat space. The website images can be misleading. You don't know whether things are going to fit. There's far too much to choose. Stitch Fix is a service for men and women which makes shopping for clothes easy.
Yep, and the added bonus is that you usually would pay a £10 styling charge, but we have a special offer. Sign up and schedule your first delivery using stitchfix.co.uk/fish, and the styling charge for your first order will be waived.
That's right. You can send back anything you decide you don't want to keep, and if you keep all 5 items, you get 20% off. And you can get started today at stitchfix.co.uk/fish to try Stitch Fix's personal styling service for free.
Okay, on with the show.
On with the podcast.
Okay, it's time for our final fact of the show, and that is Anna.
My fact this week is that pad thai was invented as part of a fascist government initiative.
Wow.
And every time you eat it, you are supporting fascism.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, I know, awkward because it's delicious. But
When was the last time you all had pad thai? I reckon I had it this weekend.
About 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I've ever had pad
Well, you're
thai.
very liberal, aren't you, Andy?
Because of my principles.
This is an amazing thing. It's from Thailand, hence the name, and it was essentially invented sort of by the leader of Thailand, a guy called Pheban, full name Luang Pheban Songkram, and he was a big populist leader in the 1930s, that era of big populist leaders who became fascists. And
Thank God we got out of that era.
Well, indeed. How times have changed, and he became essentially dictator of Thailand in 1938, and he was very anti-China, very nationalist, as was the way with sort of fascist-leaning dictators, and he wanted to stamp Thai-ness onto everything and make everything very Thai. There were loads of Chinese people in Thailand at the time. They tended to sell most of the street food, for instance. So all the food had Chinese influences. He wanted to scratch that and create this new dish. And it's not totally clear who invented it. His son claims that it was in their household that it was invented, and they used to have it as a family together. Other people say maybe he ran a competition to invent it. But essentially, he published and promoted this recipe for pad thai to incorporate lots of nice Thai tweaks and made everyone eat it.
That's interesting. I did read that it's not Thai, that it's a Chinese meal which has been sort of adopted. Did you see that?
Because China and Thailand are all kind of like noodle or rice-based stuff, it does use, like Chinese noodles. It basically took Chinese noodle dishes and added lots of Thai-ness to it. So the Thai bits are things like the palm sugar, that real nice sweet sugariness, the chili tamarind flavour that you get. Yeah. That was all Thai
Also,
additions.
bean sprouts, is very Thai.
Okay.
Which is on top.
But yeah, it wasn't like a pizza. They had to work with what they had. And what they had was the same ingredients as Chinese food.
Yeah, actually, you were saying about the food vendors all being Chinese. Any foreign food vendors were banned by Pheban.
Yeah.
He said you're not allowed to do that. And the government kind of bought a load of food carts and then got people to run them and said, right, you've got to sell pad thai from these food carts. They made it so that everyone had to eat at certain times every day, and you were allowed no more than 4 meals a day. Because this was the Thai way as opposed to the Chinese way. You were supposed
it's not
to...
that rigorous, is it?
How
if the
many-
government mandated no
how
more
many
than
meals
4 meals a day.
Are snacks allowed?
I think
dunno,
that might
dunno.
not be.
I
Because
don't
I
think
have
so.
some pretty hefty snacks. You
Yeah,
know, I only have
know.
3 meals a day, but if you add in snacks, I'm shading 6.
I think you're not allowed. You wouldn't be allowed in 1930s Thailand. He was the one who changed the name to Thailand from Siam.
Yes.
He mandated that everyone had to sleep 6 to 8 hours a day, which apparently was also a Thai thing as opposed to a Chinese thing. And he said that everyone had to wear hats.
How long were the Chinese eating 15 meals a day and sleeping for 21 hours?
It appears that way.
Bizarre.
It wasn't even just hats. You had to make sure you wore shoes. If there were photos of people without hats and shoes in them, they were painted onto the actual photo itself.
Really?
Yeah, there were all these he made sure that, and this was an order, that you had to kiss. This is if you were a male worker, you had to kiss your wife before you left for work. That was part of the mandate. And
I do think that's nice.
Yeah, but
I mean,
it's
I don't,
sort of-
Not if you have to.
Not if you
it
have
takes
to,
the meaning off it, doesn't
You're
it?
absolutely
if
right.
you go to work and give your wife a kiss and she knows that if you don't do it, you're going to be arrested, I think it takes a lot of love
You're
out
right.
of it.
And sometimes you've had a tiff and you actually want to make a point.
Yeah. Well, then you can.
And you're like,
eat
I
some
hate you
garlic.
so much. I'm
willing
willing to be arrested by the fascist government of Thailand.
That actually, it really makes the point much more effectively.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than just saying, sorry, train, gotta go.
Well, the reason we all think it's nice is because we are Westerners,
Yeah.
and that's why he was trying to.
He was trying to
institute it, wasn't he?
westernise.
He was, it was just absolutely bang on classic. But like desperately trying to Westernize and modernize, partly our fault. He came about because Thailand or Siam had never been conquered, never really been colonized by the West, unlike pretty much everywhere else.
Sounds
in
like
that
it was
area.
explicitly not our fault.
No, but wait for it.
Oh no.
It felt like they were in danger of being colonized because we weren't over that phase of history at the time, and they were like, the reason we haven't been colonized is because we're really cultured, we're civilized. You know, Westerners think that we don't need to be colonized, and we need to kind of persuade the West not to invade us by westernizing and modernizing massively, and that's going to mean kissing our wives, and that's why the Brits didn't invade Thailand. We saw they were kissing their wives as they left, and that was the idea.
I'm wearing hats.
And wearing hats. Yeah.
Can't possibly arrest all these good chaps who are going around wearing hats and kissing their wives.
Precisely.
Wow.
You've got the British mentality of the 1930s.
Yeah, it's not the first time I've heard that either.
He banned listening to American and European music, though. Why would he do that?
Well,
Wouldn't that
again,
play
he
in
wanted
more?
to get the Thai culture.
national-
Okay, I
Nationalism,
guess so.
yeah.
Yeah.
He ordered every single household to have a picture of him in their homes. Classic fascist behaviour. It's vintage stuff. And also, theatre and cinema audiences had to bow to an image of him before each viewing of the screening of the film or performance of the play.
Really?
Oh, well,
Yeah.
that's fine because
Is it?
well, in 1930
You
cinema
willing to
and
bow to
theatre,
Boris Johnson before you see One Man, Two Governors?
you've got to stand up and sing "God Save the Queen" in the cinemas before a movie and at the
Yeah,
end of a
he
movie.
did.
That's
Yeah.
what happened here. Like it's not any different.
That's the same thing, yeah.
Yeah.
He had to use forks and spoons. National cutlery. Got rid of chopsticks. Again, it's this weird hybrid of persuading the West that we're westernized and modern, but also keeping real Thai-ness. Thai food with forks and spoons. And also, they went through all these popular songs and they took out, if any like popular folk songs mentioned other ethnicities that weren't Thai, they were rewritten. So like if you were Lao or if you were Burmese, because there were lots of different ethnicities in Thailand at the time, then couldn't sing it anymore.
Really?
Wow.
So if you had like the song The Irish Rover, did they rewrite it as the Thai Rover?
Yeah, and that was one of the most popular songs at the time. So,
I can't think of any other songs which had an ethnicity in them.
let's see.
But so they would send the artist back into the studio. It wouldn't be like the DJ at the radio station would just come in and just say a new word over a song playing.
Well, this is where Andy's Foley artist comes in, isn't it? They employed Jack Foley to say the word Thai over everything else.
Actually, it doesn't sound like Thai if you say the word Thai. You have to say the word Swiss because that better creates the sound of the word Thai. Anyway, he was a fascist bad guy.
Yeah.
They had a noodles song as well.
Did
Oh,
they?
yeah.
Yeah. Thai,
Let's hear it.
because it's. Do you want to hear it?
Yep.
Yes, please.
It sounds
I
so
want
fun.
2, 3, 4.
Noodles, noodles, noodles is how it starts. Thai vegetables are wealth in the ground. You can find it anywhere. Keep buying and selling, as Thai people always help each other. Noodles, noodles. I imagine something's been lost in translation, but
The tune.
Do you know we've only just worked out how to break a noodle in half?
Not true.
Scientists have. Well, 2018.
Okay.
4 years ago. This is like a straight noodle or a bit of spaghetti, and it's just impossible to snap it in half.
Yeah.
If you try doing it.
Oh, yeah.
It's really interesting. If you're at home now, like get a long piece of spaghetto, a long spaghetto, and you hold both ends of it and then start to bend, right, until it snaps, you'll find that the two bits in your hand stay in your hand, and then the bit in the middle comes out, so it doesn't break into two pieces. It always breaks into three. It's really interesting.
that is interesting.
Always get
Although if you
tricked.
hold it in the middle, you can snap
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what they learned in 2018.
Andy, if only you'd been there. I mean, you could have saved thusand of pounds worth of
Yeah.
research
I think
money.
a really famous scientist, like
Richard Feynman
yeah.
he was obsessed with this problem, so he used to stay up all night repeatedly snapping strands of spaghetti. You know, incredibly famous physicist Richard Feynman.
Wow.
And he died in the 80s or 90s, so he never
never knew.
he's not alive to
So sad.
see the 2018 innovation. What happened?
He died clutching a noodle. It flew into his eye and through to his brain. No, we figured out why you can't do it in 2006, and that's to do with this kickback wave that travels through the spaghetti when you snap it and smashes it up. But it then took another 12 years to figure out how to overcome it. And the way you overcome it is you twist the spaghetti 280 degrees, so almost a full all the way around.
Right.
And then you break it gently, slowly, and that solves your problem.
Yeah, I think if you are at home and you do try that, sometimes you break it and it does go into two and you're really disappointed. But I think that might be because you've got either too much or too little moisture in your spaghetti.
Yeah. If you try it just without
If you
twist.
try, I'm just saying, don't write in. If
Yeah,
you break your spaghetti and
Very
it
good
breaks
point.
into two straight away, then don't write in.
It's your fault, is what we're saying. Yeah. So, are there any? It feels like a stupid question. Are there any applications for this?
Yeah, loads.
Yeah.
But that's probably not time to go through
Probably military. It's probably PAE systems have probably bought it.
them. We make drones out of
Right.
snapped spaghetti now. Yeah.
Is it
Oh, go on.
Is it the same principle for anything that is one big long stick? As in, I'm trying to think of someone doing a
Lollies.
polvo. No, sorry.
A pole vault.
No,
A vaulting pole.
Yeah, a vaulting pole. They're at one end,
Really?
the others, and we do see them snap, and they tend to snap in two, I think.
Do they snap?
Yeah, they have snapped from time to time. No, I think it's because the spaghetti has got a certain tensile strength that it works particularly well with that.
Okay.
I think.
Okay, how about in last year, a woman was burgled in a helicopter was dispatched to the scene of this burglary.
Yeah,
Bloody hell.
right.
And
That's a. So it wasn't in Britain then. Oh.
because of police funding.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the only things
What, we're allowed to make references to Tony Blair's Home Office habeas corpus policies, but I'm not allowed to comment on police cuts
Can
now.
I just say, how many police cuts do you think you would not have to have before we could get a helicopter going to every burglary that happens?
All I'm saying is, James, when I stand for election, that's going to be one of my flagship policies. Chopper at your house within 7 minutes of the burglary happening.
Well, this story does reek of an overfunded police force because the only things that were stolen were 8 pot noodles, and
Okay.
not just individual noodles, pot noodle, but
They dispatched a helicopter.
packets. I don't think they knew at the time that it was just pot noodles that had been taken. A woman just saw.
Was this woman the Queen?
Yeah, she
But
loved.
didn't we
pot
learn
noodles.
earlier that they were using helicopters to lift up pilchards from the water?
Yeah, Nutty Noah.
So, it's like...
What are you saying? We've got spare helicopters coming out of our
yeah,
ears.
seems like it.
Yeah. I think she didn't know at the time. She just saw this burglar in her garden, having leapt out of her house, I guess. Called the police. They were like, oh, God, emergency. And it was only later when they interviewed her, they said, what's been taken? And she said, well, actually, 8 pot noodles. And she said they took all the beef and tomato flavoured ones, but didn't take the chicken and mushroom ones.
Ah.
Really? Yeah, I understand that.
I was going
Do
to
you?
say, yeah.
Have you heard of Watana Panic?
Say it again.
Watana Panic.
No.
Watana. It's in Thailand. It's a noodle soup joint. Maybe the Watana family, I don't know. But it's a place where you can buy noodle soup, and they're one of these places where every day they take the last bit of the previous soup and put it into the next soup. Like a perpetual soup. And so whatever you buy, if you get some of this beef noodles, you might be having stuff from 50 years ago. Isn't it cool?
That's
Do we
really
know how
cool.
long it's been going on? How long
It's
they
been
claim?
going 3 generations.
Wow.
We think 45 years and
Cool.
counting. But I was reading about these perpetual soups, and there's some claims. One of them, apparently, there's one story that there was a perpetual stew in Perpignan in France that was going from the 15th century until World War II.
What, then the Nazis bombed it?
They ran out of ingredients due to the
Wow.
German occupation
Are you
and had to
kidding?
stop their stew.
You could just water it. I would have thought you could just water it down until it's basically water, but keep the stew. Technically, it's still the stew,
Yeah.
but they've got bigger. You've got bigger things on your mind when the Nazis are rolling in, so that's fair enough.
Yeah, you do. There was
I don't
one in
criticise,
Normandy. That apparently was over 300 years old. This is according to this is an article in a newspaper called the Navhin Times, which is from Goa, and I couldn't find it anywhere else. So God knows if this is true.
They've got an unbelievably good Normandy correspondent.
Wait till I tell you what it is, because it's so unlikely. But also, what a weird thing to make up. They said that in Normandy they had a pot which had been bubbling away for over 300 years. It was in a Cistercian abbey, and researchers went into this soup and took some tests, and they said that there were still some ingredients in there that had been in the stew for 350 years.
What? James, what you're reading is the Indian equivalent of the Daily Express.
But it is like that thing, isn't it, where every glass of water you drink has been through a dinosaur.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Hitler.
And Hitler, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why I've stopped drinking water, actually.
Yeah. Is there a filter for that?
Fitler, it's called.
It hasn't been through... I mean, Hitler didn't drink that much. I don't think every glass of water...
I think he was
I think
teetotal. So I think
or
he
is,
would
it,
have
is that a thing that there's enough...
molecules. Yeah.
Sorry, I just remembered it's not the whole glass of water. It's one molecule.
Okay, that's it. That is all of our facts. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get in contact with any of us about the things that we have said over the course of this podcast, we can all be found on our Twitter accounts. I'm on @Schreiberland, Andy,
@AndrewHunterM,
James,
@James Harkin,
and Anna.
You can email podcast@qi.com.
Yep, or you can go to our group account, which is @NoSuchThing, or our website, nosuchthingasafish.com. All the previous episodes are up there, so do check them out. And we will be back again next week with another episode. We'll see you then. Goodbye.